Hello and welcome to WoodCentral. My name is Jason Ross and I am the co-publisher of WoodCentral. WoodCentral is Australia's first and only dedicated platform covering wood-based media across all digital platforms. Our vision is to develop an integrated platform for media events, education and products that connect, inform and inspire the people and organisations who work in and promote forestry, timber and fibre. Our mission is to positively influence specifiers and consumers of timber-based products, using media to grow the market for forest products and share the stories of the ultimate renewable, for the industry, by the industry. Allow me to introduce Jim Bowden as co-publisher and senior editor of WoodCentral.
Hello Jason, thanks for the pleasure for being here today.
No worries at all, Jim. Jim, nearly 300 industry stakeholders were in Canberra's Hyatt Hotel on November 29 for the Australian Forest Products Association's members' dinner, addressed by the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. First business of the day was a presentation by AFPA CEO Ross Hampson to mark your 60 years as a rural scribe.
Well, yes, that was quite an exciting evening for me. I was given a crafted timber pen, which was a sign for those assembled that I will continue to write for the industry with no plans for retirement, I can assure you.
The timber pen or pencil is mightier than the sword.
Well, you make the cut. Yes, it's been an inspiring and puzzling time with this great industry, inspiring in part by how our infinite timber products and the amazing new engineering technology that puts them together like never before. Powerful, sustainable construction systems to convince architects and designers globally that wood is the only real green building alternative. Puzzling? Yes, puzzling how governments, particularly Labor in Victoria and West Australia and elsewhere, have stubbornly and consistently failed to see the forest for the trees, hell-bent on slaughtering carbon-positive, sustainably managed forests on the altar of eco-political ideology. So that is briefly what you could say is my mission statement.
Indeed, the discount between timber as a finished product and the forest and the trees has been one of the greatest challenges that our industry has faced over many, many years.
Well, through my years, I've written through Fraser Island, the Wash Pool, West Queensland heartaches and sawmill closures. Now we are geared and ready to continue defending our industry at every turn as more forest closures are on the political agenda. So that's an important initiative, I think, with WoodCentral. I can't imagine a more ideal community in which to operate a serious-minded industry news sheet. That's why I stay in this business. After more than 60 years in the agriculture, mining and forestry media, I must say I enjoy the job, the industry and the industrious people in it. So why retire and throw away that enjoyment? I also sentimentally remember founding Australian Timberman 44 years ago and earning my first byline 64 years ago in the days of hot metal newspapers, long before the internet and the dot-com bubble, and even long before fax machines. And you know, it's amazing, I'm only 45.
45 in journalistic terms. Of that, we are all very thankful. You've put your name or ghostwritten some of the biggest and most influential stories ever broken in our industry.
Well, forest saviours aside, we will continue to recognise and promote Australia's world-leading wood science technology. In the first broadcast of WoodCentral, we are inspired with what's going on at the DAF Salisbury Research Centre in Brisbane. A wood world, a scientific technology theme park that has become the epicentre of Australia's research into wood products and processing, a plethora of key projects completed or underway. Engineered wood composites, product design, kiln drying, sawmilling, veneer processing, grading, wood properties evaluation, performance testing, timber protection and wood extractive analysis. But their wood science skills and exchange of knowledge reaches further to New Zealand, France, Switzerland, Germany, the US, Brazil, Indonesia, Vietnam, Laos and Fiji. I don't apologise for that plug because nowhere else in Australia is a scientific laboratory or research centre with the capabilities and the work completed there. The trust of our readers is essential. We continue to evolve by remembering that our readers, those that work in every part of this wonderful industry we're all friends here.
And ultimately it comes down to voice. WoodCentral is a platform which will finally give us as an industry a strong voice, which is chronically underrepresented in the media landscape.
Yes, well, like DAF and our future readers, we have set a very clear vision. I'm not telling our readers and our listeners, and certainly those who are not even in forestry, but we believe will be coming on board when they hear about what we're doing, that forests are a renewable resource and as an industry we lead in sustainable certified forest management. Full stop. And through WoodCentral, we're going to let a hell of a lot of people know more about this across the globe, Jason.
Indeed. You must have better vision than me, Jim.
You know, I still reflect on pro-forestry scientist Dr. Patrick Moore, co-founder of Greenpeace, who I interviewed in Brisbane in 1998 when he was invited by Rod McInnes, who was then Timber Queensland, or Queensland Timber Board then, CEO. He said Greenpeace had achieved great things while he was there, but by the 1980s the group had become too radical. My decision was made in the 1980s, he said. At the time I said very clearly, I'm going to stick with the science and logic. You can keep your fear-mongering. We did a good job, and it's a shame it got turned into a racket.
We don't deal with rackets in the industry, do we, Jim?
Yes, meanwhile others busy themselves with new and scientifically grounded campaigns against forestry. Forestry, a renewable resource, and as an industry we lead in sustainable certified forest management. Full stop.
Indeed, it's also important to reflect on some of the positive work undertaken by environmental groups such as Planet Ark, who support our industry so vigorously through the Make It Wood campaign. The Green Building Council of Australia, who through the Responsible Products Framework have created pathways for more and more finished timber products to be recognised in green buildings. And more recently, the Australian Clean Energy Finance Corporation, which has recognised the mass timber as the most sustainable building material in major production, and thus providing a $300 million incentive for developers to use mass timber products such as LVL, CLT and GLT in major construction projects.
Yes, very exciting, no doubt. You know, I've had a bit of time to reflect on various things, particularly within our industry. It takes me back to when I was with the Cattlemen's Union in the 1970s, with that legendary media master, the late Rick Farley, which was then the most powerful and promotional rump of the national beef business. And that was a time when we had, it still existed, was what they called the breed wars. The Bos Taurus, like the Hereford, against the Bos Indicus tropical breeds like Brahmans. Pommy cattle compared with their virtues with floppy-eared mongrels from India and Africa and the like. As foundation editor of the then Cattlemen, we mounted a campaign, Beef is Beef. Let's promote it in a united way rather than waste time on the colour of a cow's hide. We were soon joined in the campaign by my alma mater, Queensland Country Life. What followed was a combined industry promotion of beef. I can relate this promotion of beef, no matter the breed, with the native forest versus softwood plantation tugs of war. I repeat, we're all friends here, and we all produce timber.
The industry sure has changed. Where once the primary distribution method for news was the printing press, and sorry for our friends in the paper and packaging industry today, we're able to sit here in a studio and cut up an interview for multiple audiences across multiple platforms. Imagine what we could do with some advertising. Jim, what excites you most about WoodCentral?
Well, when we first planted the WoodCentral seed, for me it was a sleepless night, quite a few sleepless nights, with hundreds of light bulbs, or should I say flash bulbs, exploding in my mind. WoodCentral's success and timing is a no-brainer for us right now.
And I must say, actually, over the last 3 or 4 months, I've been very fortunate to be the recipient of a Gottstein Fellowship. And one of the key findings from that fellowship so far has been the lack of coordination and communication through to media as well. So it's been very exciting to kick off this particular venture. WoodCentral is for the industry, by the industry. We're bringing the timber media into the 2020s. With the advent of social media, journalists no longer report the story. Often, contributors are the story. When we launch, we will still have more than 320 media partners from right across the world who will be relying on WoodCentral to distribute news from the Australian forestry and forest products industry. Talk about reach. WoodCentral uses social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube to attract new, younger and more diverse audiences to our industry. And the great thing about timber is that it's already sexy.
Yeah, and of course there's podcasting. Who would have thought you could get paid to talk?
Absolutely. WoodCentral will be using podcasting to cover all the major developments that shape our industry. We will use sound grapes to amplify our reach through social media.
And it's fair to say we will have a lot to unpack, Jason.
And it's not just us. We'll be inviting subject matter experts from right across the timber and forestry industry as our special guests to the podcast, supporting WoodCentral daily stories with hard-hitting interviews, editorial and journalism.
Yes, and with the Victorian election in the rear window, the New South Wales and Queensland state elections coming up, and its ramifications for native hardwood industry, the surge in Russian lumber via China hitting our shores, and the development of an Australian-made LVL and CLT mass timber market We sure have a lot to talk about.
Indeed, and it's actually interesting to reflect on the Russian timber via China link. We ran a story in the Fifth Estate, a sustainability-focused publication, from a story that you actually ran in the Timber and Forestry e-News 2 weeks prior. And it was interesting to compare the reach between a sustainability-focused publication with wide-reaching digital reach versus the old e-News. Within the e-News, we had a very limited run within our existing media channels. Within the Fifth Estate editorial, with very limited editorial changes, we were able to amplify and reach far-reaching audiences. The benefit about WoodCentral, it's about taking subject matter experts from our industry and expanding it out and getting our stories into the mainstream.
Yeah, what I want to look at too is, of course, I go back quite a while, established the Timberman in 1977. Now, how that came about, I had a composing business in partnership, and one of the other jobs we used to do was the compositing of the free suburban newspapers for Murdoch, the ones we used to throw over the fence, and they used to be printed. We had a composing room, and then, of course, we had a rotary press. And there was a guy down the end of the stone, as we call it there, fiddling around. I said to my mate, my partner, I said, "Who's that guy?" He said, "Oh, this fellow's David Armstrong." I said, "What does he do?" He said, "Oh, he's manager of Queensland Timber Board." So I sidled up to him and said, "My name's Jim Baird. Who you do? What do you do?" He told me. He said, "We're just trying you guys out to produce a new log form magazine, we're going to call it." So that was all right. And then I got to meet him a few times, and I suggested, well, listen, that's purely to members, right? I said, why don't you consider turning it into a monthly timber magazine, possibly supported by advertising? We'll give you a magazine for nothing if we do all the hard work and sell a few ads and we keep that. So he jumped at that idea, and that's how we formed Australian Timberman way back then. But now it makes me think, all those guys, so many of them, so many of my friends, professional people are no longer with us, either retired, and I tell you what, every 2 months we get together at a place called the Grand Central Hotel in Brisbane. And these are guys that go back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, foresters, timber merchants.
The icons, Jim.
The icons, yeah, the good guys. But they're not with us anymore. A lot of them still read the magazine. I get comments back at the end of each edition I put out. "Oh, that was good, Jim. That was great. Hey, Jim, I don't agree with you on that, but you're close to the mark." All that sort of thing. Now, I don't have those guys now to lean on, if you like, or to get second opinions, because they're either in the pool, they're playing golf, or God knows what they're doing. So, Jason, what do you think about the new audience? I mean, the audience I'm talking about was a stellar audience. They were just amazing people. But I think we've got just as amazing people coming up now in the industry who are a lot younger than me.
Absolutely. And I must say, actually, very fortunately, a few months ago, I was invited to MC the BDAA National Conference with over 700 building designers from all over Australia. Now, what was interesting about that conference was that we only had one timber-based advertiser, but more than 50% of the presenters spoke about timber.
Fantastic.
So what does that tell you about the appeal of timber as a product?
Exactly.
And most of the audience were younger females, building designers, architects, draftspeople, etc. They don't like being called draftspeople, but building designers.
So they're using a large lump of wood to smash it through the glass ceiling. Yeah, it's good to hear that comment you're making about women in the industry. Just to expand on that.
So I think when you look at the attraction of timber as a product, the consumers are very much slanted towards females. What we've noticed over the last 5 or 10 years in our industry has been the emergence of more females in executive positions. You look at, for example, Katie Fowden, Christine Briggs, Eileen Newberry, as well as Clarissa Brand as well, Marie McCaskill. We're seeing an emergence of more female people in our industry who've got considerable voices. You also look at Kirsten Gentle as well, look at the terrific work she's doing at the FTMA, as well as the Timber Framing Collective. So, you know, we've got a great opportunity to actually expand out. And the other thing I want to reflect on as well is that fountain of knowledge that you actually have, Jim, amongst your colleagues and your icons. The great thing about WoodCentral is that we'll be storing all our articles on our platform so that they'll always be available to use as an archive, as a library, because the stories that made news 30 or 40 years ago, you never know, they could actually become, we can reflect back on those stories and actually push those back to the modern audiences as well. So we can't lose that nucleus of talent from the past as well.
Yes, the palette from the past. That's what excites me, is this whole new process, podcasts and what we're doing, lifting up to a platform and all of that. because I'm still amazed by this and appreciate it and learn more about it day by day, I must add. But here to be part of this, to move ahead, to jump a chasm of where I started to where we are today in just a matter of a few years. And we mustn't forget that it was the newspaper industry that really got computers going. If we think of Murdoch and the Wapping occasion when he switched from hot metal to coal type. So yes, for me this is dramatically exciting to be part of it. To think I'm still going, but I'm enthused by it. And it's people like Jason that have done it, the old guy and the young guy, you know. What a combination. We've got what's happening now, what's going to happen. I've got me talking about what happened in the past, blending the whole lot together into WoodCentral. And what a great name for that, WoodCentral. So what I'm saying to you guys is you're soon to arrive at WoodCentral, so climb aboard.
Now, it's funny also, Jim, we reflected before on the female representation within our industry, and who could forget, of course, Deb Kerr and the terrific work that she's recently done during the Victorian election. And I want to actually reflect on what we're going to actually be talking about as major touch points for 2023. So we've just had the Victorian state election. We've got the New South Wales state election coming up, the Queensland election the year after. We've just had a Commonwealth election. We've got a new AFPA team coming on board in the new year. Joel Fitzgibbons jumped into the chair as the interim chair of the CEO of AFPA as well. So we've got plenty to talk about there. We've also got the emergence of LVL and CLT coming on board. So the amount of mass timber produced by the Australian audience and the Australian industry is quite fascinating. And of course, discounts. One of the great challenges of 2022 was where we get our timber from. I suppose that in 2023, the challenge will be about the dreaded discounts for timber with oversupply coming from Russia via China. Do you have anything to say about that, Jim?
No, while you're on that Russian angle, we realise we must have wood, and I know that quite a lot of Russian wood has arrived in Australia, despite it being conflict timber, but arriving in the shape of course, Chinese manufactured engineered wood. This concerns me a little, well, probably a lot, but if it's certified correctly, it's managed properly, and we've got chain of custody, then we see no problem with that, except we have this conflict with the conflict timber. Yes, very interesting to watch that. So to get back to that certification, a chain of custody and so on, I've had a great relationship over the years with Simon Dorries. His blood is thick with engineered wood thoughts, but he's a master at working through this necessary forest management and chain of custody. So yes, as I said before, provided it meets all the shirts and cuffs and collars match, well then we're happy with that. But nonetheless, we realise the authorities are keeping a close eye on it. But that's whatever happens, let's be so pleased that quantities are there now that we will build with wood as opposed to alternative, non-renewables.
And indeed, it's important to reflect also that for 2022, FSC have appointed a new CEO, Melanie Robertson, as well. So that'll be a major topic of discussion for 2023. The certification argument and debate is very interesting. So depending on who you talk to, certification is very important. So a major market for our stories will be architects, engineers and specifiers of timber, and those particular audiences love certification. And one of the challenges that we face as an industry is developing stories that we can actually frame so that they understand the benefits of using timber against concrete and steel. One of the stories of 2023, I believe, will be the MECLA debate as well. So MECLA is a new association or a new campaign born out of the New South Wales and South Australian governments with support of Lend-Lease to try to demonstrate the embodied carbon elements of steel, concrete and timber. So I think that one of the major issues for 2023 for WoodCentral will be around looking at the topics of sustainability of timbers against steel and concrete, using the type of stories that we need as an industry and articulating it to specifiers of timber-based products as well.
I see the Timber Design Awards are coming up, Jason. I see that you're an invited guest. It's always a great night to find out how clever the architects are and who will walk away with the top awards. But how do you see WoodCentral? I have my ideas, but I'm interested in yours. How do you see WoodCentral joining in on these events like the TDA Awards and other similar events, and how we can intermesh with that?
Very interesting point. So if you look at the Timber Design Awards, you look at timber in construction or timber off-site construction, and you look at the likes of the Wood Solution programs. And I think we often, as an industry, have had a disconnect between having these fabulous events that service the industry, but it gets lost in the media, in the distribution.
Yep.
So I guess one of the challenges that I think, and the great opportunities I think that Wood Solutions has, is that we can be at the forefront of the marketing of these events. We can assist with the coverage at the time using real-time social media and live streaming, and we can cover the aftermath. Because often with events, as you know, Jim, with your comprehensive experience in event space, it's not just about the event itself, but it's what you can do with the event after it's finished. And I think it's really important that as an industry, we have a marketing body that can actually cover the events and actually push it through to distribution, particularly with our 320 or so media partners from all over the world as well, because that's how we get amplification and that's how we get our stories out that are more likely to be viral as well. So Jim, for many, many years, you've been effectively the scribe of our industry. I would probably gather that more than 50% of all stories outbound through publication have come from your source, either ghostwritten as an editorial or on behalf of someone else. So how, as an industry, can we actually use these stories and actually get broader reach from the same story?
Yes, I think what we can do is certainly get a broader reach. I would think through the very thing you mentioned. We just talk advertising and we talk promotion. So advertising is a paid dollar, and you could run an ad and so on, and we hope people will do that. But beyond that, we can offer services like producing stories for what I like to call them sponsors, and we can embellish that as an add-on, as a no-cost add-on, which means that we can have in-depth stories on clients of our advertisers and spread even further the message. Because we're not bound by a 20 or 28-page tabloid newspaper, we have a field, an ever-stretching field of space. That means we can keep ploughing stuff out there, and everyone will have a chance to obviously select from the various sections, if you want to call them that, whether it be wood preservation, wood technology, or whatever. So they will have so many headings in that regard. But yes, pushing it beyond the normal reader to the actual customer of the advertiser. So the advertisers' customers will also become high-profile people, a result of what we can do with WoodCentral. So that's going to be exciting, and we're going to be so pleased to be able to do that.
Now, I want to just reflect on, as an editor over many, many years, when you get stories from partners, is it very difficult to break the stories down and make effectively a press release newsworthy?
Well, that's very interesting. It's been one of my observations is that media companies, and nothing against media companies generally, but there are those who will provide a press release or a media release to their client. Let's just say it's ABC Wood Technology. And it's wonderfully crafted if you're sort of doing Shakespeare or something like that. My old editor used to say anything over 400 words or 500 words is a novel.
Geez, you must hate the articles I've sent you over the years, Jim.
But now people don't have to be filing or turning pages of paper to read all those long stories. They can get the long stories, but they're in a better format. So yes, so about those media things, when you're an editor, you've got maybe a sub-editor there and you've got deadlines. It's probably one of the greatest deadlines of all time, is writing a story for a deadline. And it always seems to be the best story you write at the last 3 minutes is the best you'll ever write. So deadlines I really enjoy. They get a kick out of them.
So Jim, one of the great things about WoodCentral is that we anticipate that WoodCentral will very much support the activities of Wood Solutions. Wood Solutions is the largest technical resource for timber anywhere in the world. So we know that people are looking for wood, but what we can provide at WoodCentral is editorial to support the content on Wood Solutions websites. We can provide content that goes into detail about from the source to support technical developments in timber, the topics of the day, and we can support events from Wood Solutions. Do you have any thoughts on that, Jim?
Well, I think, yes, good wood stories is what you're talking about. We can definitely be a strong arm to Wood Solutions. Wonderful people, wonderful friends there. And I can't help but agree with you that we can expand that further for them and for us.
A big focus of our new platform will be around running campaigns to support greater community and alignment within our industry as well.
I think also we should look at the political scene, which we monitor all the time.
Dangerous, Jim.
Very interesting. But Yes, from the political side, we're going to have a sharp stick, I can tell you, on governments, particularly with what's coming ahead in Queensland and New South Wales. So although we don't like to think we're a political one-sided, one party, one against the other, so we just hold a mirror up to our readers, and that's all we are, is a mirror of what our readers are thinking.
Jim Bowden working for the Daily Mirror. I never thought I'd see the day.
But, well, there was going to be a lot of surprises, mate. That's one of them. But no, that is a point, and a very good one. Politically, we will be touching on political terms, the politics of the industry itself, the politics of politicians themselves, and the politics of our readers. So we won't be pushing anything down their throat regarding vote for this one or vote for that one. That's not our job. But our job is to make sure these guys realise the value of forests and promotion, of course, too.
So, Jim, one of the challenges that we face at WoodCentral is the discussion on certification and eco-labels. Recently, the ACCC released findings around greenwashing and ensuring that labels can be verified and supported with claims. I guess in the timber industry, we're very fortunate. We've got two highly credible schemes, PSC underpinned by Responsible Wood in Australia and FSC in Australia and New Zealand. Do you have any thoughts about that, Jim?
Well, that's interesting. Just before I came to our discussions here, I got a cup of coffee around the corner and I looked at a very neat brand on the cup which said Planet Saver, tree-free product. And I looked at it and it comprises mostly plastic. It would be the main content of this vessel. And then, of course, it said that it had bamboo fibres in it. Well, that's okay. That's a grass. But again, this is the sort of thing we've got to watch, and this is why it's so important that our branding is correct. And I don't know whether anyone would take any notice of it being tree-free, but it just lets you know what is out there and what we're trying to work, not against, but to expose, maybe might be the naughty word I should use. But, of course, you know where my heart lies, so if somebody's telling me it's a tree-free coffee, I know it's a lot of bullshit.
Rolls off the tongue, though, doesn't it, tree-free? But, you know, it's an interesting point you raised there, Jim, because, I mean, if you look over the next 3 years, one of the major issues that will underpin the push towards certification is the decisions by Coles, Woolworths, Wesfarmers to require mandatory disclosure of certification labels. And that provides some great opportunities for FSC and PFC and Responsible Wood to get more certified products through the supply chains. Many of our subscribers and many of our supporters of WoodCentral are indeed certified, but they've lacked in the past the marketing engine to really promote their certification credentials. And I think what WoodCentral can provide with the support of FSC and Responsible Wood is a third-party platform to distribute information outward to the market as well. And I think Coles and Woolworths will really value that.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth, mate, but I can't help but fully agree with you on that. You're certainly, yes, we're all on the right track there.
And often I actually must say, before I had this podcast, I thought Jim was just the scribe of the industry, but he's also the voice of the industry. He's got a bit of a John Laws vibe about his voice today.
No golden microphone here.
Not yet anyway, you've just got the pencil. You know, it's interesting though, Jim, because, you know, my observation, having worked in the industry for 4 years, being a supporter my whole life of timber, but coming from the construction industry, where we often preference steel and concrete over timber, unfortunately, it was one of my original sins, is that a lot of our media has been driven by industry associations rather than product consumers as well. So one of the things I think we need to do as balance at WoodCentral is get the stories from the timber companies as well as the industry associations. Because what people are actually interested in as consumers is what the likes of the Hines, the WeatherTechs, the Big Rivers, the Pentarks, the Ashes, the Neville Smith Forest products. They're interested in stories from those product categories, not just from the associations that are represented by those companies as well. Do you have any thoughts about that, Jim?
Well, if you don't mind, just something that's come across my phone just sitting here beeped, and I know that seems rude, but I opened it because I knew who it was from. It was from a fellow called Tony Nielsen, who used to run Inwood magazine. He was a Kiwi guy that was then eventually worked in, and I worked for that magazine for a while with Tony. A lot of people out there remember Tony, great journalist, great industry supporter. But when he got the hang of what we were doing, he sent me this. This has just arrived today. Do you mind if I read it?
Absolutely, Jim.
Jim, sounds like a great initiative. Hopefully you can arrange for me to go on the mailing list. A few comments that you should feel free to use as much or as little as you see fit.
Well, he's on the podcast now, so he's fully public.
Wonders will never cease. The launch of a new digital product about the wood industry. Congratulations, Jim, on having the testicular fortitude to lend your considerable passion and experience to such a bold and cleverly envisioned project. He can still write well, this guy, right? We have known each other for a very long time. And when I heard that you had retired, I was aghast, appalled even. The timber media without Jim Bowden's byline, so abruptly gone, was difficult to accept. After all, you're not even 90 yet. Very best of good fortune to you and your colleagues with the WoodCentral venture. I look forward to following your progress. Tony Nielsen, former publisher in Wood Magazine.
Fantastic. And I must say, Jim, one of the major stories that you covered for 2022 was the 140-year celebration for Hine Timber. You've been a lifelong friend of many people of the Hine family for many, many years.
5 generations?
5 generations. And I think it's important to get the Hine, the X-Lam stories out to consumers because they've often seen these brands, but they don't know the stories that underpin the generations. You know, before I joined the timber industry, I used to work for a company that was around for 55 years, which is a long time in the building and construction industry. But to be around for 140 years and have that connection to the Maryborough community, those are the sort of stories that we can really push through the WoodCentral platform.
I was fortunate, Jason, to be the last person to interview Lambert Hine, amazing man. And I remember going to the office up there. We had an appointment, and the great man was in his office, small office at the back. He'd retired. He'd passed it on to Warren Hine, another great friend. And when I was waiting, I noticed these large dogs running around there. They're running under the tables. I could see the girls in the typing pool were not too happy about this, but they were Lambert's dogs, so nothing was said. So I did this interview with Lambert, and just an amazing person. And I was also able to, with others, to present a trophy to Lambert on their 100th anniversary at the Caloundra Ostis conference. And then we talk about Warren Hine, who I always thought was the captain of the ship. And when we lost a wonderful man like Warren Hine, it was a real, he'd left the bridge and we were all much poorer for it. But I was covering the wood shops at Brisbane Royal Show one year, and Warren came up, just happened to be visiting the show, and turned up with his wife. And he was introduced to various axemen there and so on, who he was and everything else. When that was about the time I launched Timberman. A wonderful man, another wonderful journalist that I respected and looked up to was a fellow called Con Lemke, who to run what we called the Industry Bible then, which was the Australian Forest Industry Journal. Well, he just got slightly miffed when he heard about the Timberman magazine starting up in Queensland and advised David Armstrong, and hopefully this would filter through to me, he thought, that wasn't a good idea because he was the national body, he was the national voice, and this might confuse people by having some sort of competition. And he didn't even consider it as competition at that stage. So we took that on board and we thought about it. So we went to Warren Hine and explained that. So he said, I'll ring him. So Warren Hine rang Con Lemke and said, Con, I appreciate what you're saying, but in Queensland we do things differently up here, to quote somebody else. He said,
What's you talking about?
It
Don't you worry about that,
continues,
Jim.
the publication continues for the benefit of the Queensland industry. Yeah. And we think that it will complement the great work you're doing. Well, having heard this from Warren, of course, he acquiesced and said, of course, yes, no, I can see now the point there. Then I met him at a big function, and I came in the front door with my Voigtlander camera, and he was at the other side, and we met in the middle of the room, and he said, Jim, look, you go down that end and take your photos, I'll go up that end and take my photos. The result of all that was we became very, very close friends in the sense that when he retired, he anointed me as the tour organiser for the Ligna Fair that he used to do year after year. So I did 2 of those, and that was exciting. So yes, the Hine organisation celebration 140 years, and being around for its 100th celebration and promoting that at that time, to be here for the 140th, I made it.
So Jim, just before we leave today, I just want to touch briefly on our colour selection for our branding. We've been very deliberate and very thorough with our choice of colours: red, charcoal, grey and black, to represent and celebrate timber as a colour. Do you have any thoughts about our colour selection?
Well, I remember when we first brought out Timberman back in 1976, it was all black and white then. We didn't have colour. As a matter of fact, we ventured into colour at some stage.
Fortunately, we've gone grey.
Yes. But no, I've looked through the palette and I've looked at all the colours and in your relationship to how they relate to sawdust and how they relate to a finished product and how they relate to the cut tree and all of that. And I can't help but heartily agree.
Absolutely. So for all of our audience today, stay tuned. 2023 is the year of WoodCentral. All aboard.
Yes, I'm at the platform and waiting.
Hope you have your ticket. Thank you very much for your time today, Jim.
No tickets on me.
Thank you very much for your time, Jim, today. And for all those listening, we look forward to talking to you in the new year, and we look forward to you joining our journey with WoodCentral.
And a Merry Christmas to you all.
Ho, ho, ho.